When people defend dictatorship in Africa, they always point to China. They say, look at China. They silenced protests, they made tough decisions, and now they are a global superpower. And to be fair, that story is very convincing because it is the truth. China is very powerful today. It has world-class cities, high-speed trains, massive industries, and hundreds of millions of people who no longer live in poverty. And that kind of transformation is something every developing country dreams of. But rarely do people talk about what came before the success. And I want us to talk about it today because you have a lot of Africa presidents telling you, we can't be like China, we can't be like Singapore, we can be like this country or that country, but they don't walk you through the history. And sometimes this history is very painful. To understand how China became what it is today, you have to go back to where it all started. And the year is 1949. At that time, China was not the superpower you see today. It was weak, poor, and divided. For over 100 years, you had foreign powers such as Britain, Japan, France, even Russia, carving pieces of it for themselves. They controlled its ports, its trade, and even parts of its cities. The Chinese people had been treated like strangers in their own country. But by the time the Second World War ended, China was exhausted. Decades of invasion, famine, civil war had definitely left the country on its knees. And most people lived in villages with no electricity, also no clean water, and no real future. Millions had died, and those who survived had almost nothing left but anger and humiliation. And then came Mao Zedong. He was a revolutionary, a man who promised a new beginning. He told the people that under his leadership, China would never again be humiliated by outsiders. He said, we have to stand up. So when he took over in 1949, he promised equality, he promised food, he promised dignity, and people believed him because they were tired of warlords. They were tired of being told what to do by foreigners and ready to sacrifice anything for a strong, united country. Mao didn't just want to rebuild China. He wanted to remake it completely. He wanted to erase everything that reminded people of the old China. We are talking about the traditions, the religions, the family structures, even the way people thought, all right? He wanted to create a new individual, new citizen, one who will obey, one who believes, and one who would never question the party. So right after taking power, he began tightening control in every direction. At first, he said he wanted to clean up corruption. He called it purifying the revolution. He told the people that the new China couldn't move forward with greedy businessmen, the landlords, and anyone who was still loyal to the old government. So he launched anti-corruption campaigns, which were supposed to fight bribery, the tax evasions, and waste. But very quickly, those campaigns turned into witch hunts. You had workers who were encouraged to report their bosses. Their neighbors were spying on each other. Families were turning on their own brothers and sisters just to prove their loyalty to the party. Cities also organized struggle meetings. And you know what struggles meetings are? This is a place where people who were accused of corruption were dragged to public squares, forced to confess, and humiliated in front of crowds. Some were beaten, others were stripped of everything they owned. According to historians like Frank Dicotta and official records later released in China, thousands of people took their own lives out of shame and terror during these purges. They were like, instead of me being reported and then going and being humiliated and possibly killed in front of all these thousands of people, let me just take my own life. Then in 1956, Mao briefly opened a small window. He told the Chinese people, let 100 flowers bloom, let 100 schools of thought contend, to mean, guys, maybe criticism can make the country stronger. So speak if you need to speak. Teachers, writers, and even intellectuals began speaking out. And finally, they were telling the truth about what was not working. But within months, that openness turned into a trap. Mao accused those same people of being rightists and enemies of the revolution. So he ordered mass purges, and this is what became known as the anti-rightist campaign. Hundreds of thousands were fired, jailed, or even sent to labor camps. That was the moment China learned that even honesty could be fatal. And after that, fear became very normal in China. But Mao still wanted to move faster. He doesn't care whether you guys are afraid or not. He believed that China could skip the slow process of development and catch up with the West in just a few years. So in 1958, he launched what he called the Great Leap Forward. And this is what majority of people know about China when it comes to those days. He promised that China would produce more steel and grain than Britain. And within 15 years, he believed this could be done. And it sounded very bold, patriotic, and very unstoppable. Every village, every family, every worker was told to join the movement. The country turned into one giant experiment. Farmers were ordered to abandon their small plots and join massive communal farms that were called people's communes. Families had to eat in shared canteens. You were to sleep in dormitories and give up your livestock and cook in pots. Mao said private life was very selfish, that all resources had to serve the nations. So in cities and villages, people were told to build backyard furnaces to produce steel. Men and women melted their pots, their own cooking pots, pans, even farm tools, believing they were helping to industrialize the country. But most of that metal turned out useless. Officials were terrified of disappointing Mao, so they lied about production figures, both in steel and in grain. They claimed record harvests that never existed. The state, trusting those fake numbers, took huge amounts of grain from the countryside to feed the cities and export abroad. Please understand that this guy did not want shame. He wanted to continue exporting so that foreign nations could view China as what? An exporter. So whether you guys are harvesting a lot or not, whatever is here, we gotta export it, because we need to prove to Russia, we need to prove to Britain, we need to prove to all these foreign powers that China can do it on its own. And then came one of the worst famines in modern history. From 1959 to 1961, China's countryside was gripped by hunger on a scale that the world has never seen. The crops had failed, the grain had been over-reported, and the government kept taking food from villages to maintain the illusion of success. People were starving in silence. They started eating grass, bark leather, anything they could find. In some provinces, families boiled wild roots just to trick their stomachs into feeling full. At least there's something you can eat here, so at least let me trick this stomach that we are eating something. And when even that ran out, parents made impossible choices. They sold their own children, they abandoned them by the roadside, and they also watched them die slowly. These are documented accounts. These are facts. And you can find these facts in Yang Jishen's book called Tombstone, and British historian, the one we said, Frank Dicotta's Mao's Great Famine. They are there describing villages where hundreds perished and where some people were forced to eat the bodies of those who had already died. Cannibalism. And I know this sounds unbearable, but it's part of the truth. The exact number of those deaths will never be known because China has never released official figures. But demographers like Judith Bannister and Ashley Cole, analyzing census data in the 1980s, they estimated that between 15 and 30 million people died of hunger. Later research, including Chinese sources like Yang Jishen and Western historians, placed that number even higher. Close to 45 million people died in China out of hunger. And you know why they died? Because they had say a president, we're gonna say a president or a leader somewhere who believed that he has a vision for the country and he was going to execute that vision whether you guys want it or not. And he couldn't even accept advice. All right? So at the end of the day, you are making choices where you end up costing the lives of 45 million people simply because you want other foreign powers to view your country as successful. And just to put that in perspective, 45 million people is like wiping out the entire population of Kenya. Yeah. Not because people are fighting or because there is a natural disaster, but because of political pride and fear. And according to the World Peace Foundation, it remains the largest non-war famine in human history. And what's even more tragic is that many of those deaths were avoidable. Officials in China knew people were starving, but no one dared tell Mao the truth because of the fear he had instilled in the people. And instead of slowing down, 45 million people have already died. This guy goes and doubles down. He couldn't accept that his own policies had caused the famine, so he blamed nature and pests. He claimed that food shortages were the result of natural disasters and birds were eating too much grain. According to China's own state archives, later reviewed by historians, Mao refused to believe reports of man-made starvation. He told party leaders that the country needed more revolutionary effort, not less. And that is how the Four Pests campaign began. There was actually a campaign in China against pests. And this was another grand experiment inside an even bigger tragedy. 45 million people are already dead. And now you start another campaign that is also going to cost hundreds of thousands of lives. This campaign started in 1958 as part of the patriotic health movement. The targets were simple: rats, flies, mosquitoes, and sparrows. Mao believed that if those pests were eliminated, China's farms would thrive again. He even announced that killing them was every citizen's patriotic duty. So the whole country joined in. Schools were suspended because they had pests elimination days where school children are supposed to go and help in exterminating these pests. Workers also left factories to chase birds from fields. Guys, you gotta go and watch this whole thing. You will see people drumming, the pots and everything. And I think that psychologically affects the birds. So you had the birds falling down because you are supposed to do that the whole day. Your pans, your spoons, everything, anything metallic, you had to do that the whole day. Children were also supposed to climb trees to destroy nests. And families were rewarded for bringing in bird corpses. The more dead birds you collect, the more rewards you get. In some cities, like Beijing and Shanghai, newspapers proudly reported millions of dead sparrows as proof of progress. By the spring of 1960, the species was nearly wiped out in many regions. And at first, the government celebrated this as victory. Fewer birds, more grain, right? But that success lasted only a few months. By late 1960, locust populations exploded. Because with the sparrows gone, and the sparrows were their main natural predator, the locusts swarmed fields in massive numbers, and they were eating whatever crops had survived the bad weather and poor farming. According to agricultural reports, later cited by Chinese and Western scholars, grain yields fell even further. Whatever had remained was gone. Instead of saving the harvest, the campaign deepened the famine. So yes, at first, Mao knows millions are dying, but he can't face the truth. And rather than admit failure, he redirected the blame to nature. And he was here treating the environment the same way he was treating his own people, as something to control, punish, and reshape through force or through his own crazy imagination. So by the early 1960s, China was breaking. This famine, again, now had killed tens of millions. Farms had collapsed and faith in Mao's leadership was quietly fading, even among his closest allies. Inside the Communist Party, some officials started to push back, saying the policies had gone too far. I mean, We have 45 million people plus dead. What else do you expect, you know? But then, did they really have to lose all those people for them to call out this guy? And among the people who were calling him out was Liu Xiaoping, who at the time was China's second most powerful man, and Deng Xiaoping, a skilled administrator known for being very pragmatic. They both believed that if China didn't loosen up, you know, it would collapse completely. So for a short while, Mao said, okay, you guys, you look like you have a plan, so let me step back. So Liu and Deng began to undo some of the disastrous policies. And I'm going to come to African leaders because this is why I'm telling you this history. We have a lot of, not leaders, Africa politicians, we have a lot of them committing disastrous mistakes that to undo them is going to take us a long time. And you will see how it took China a long time. Now we are happy saying or looking up to China. But as I said, please, we have to understand China's journey because they also did not have to lose 45 million people. Now you'll see how shiny China is. But there are people who are still traumatized in that nation. That, you know, I was actually watching somewhere and there was a comment where a daughter said that the grandmother cannot watch her throw even one grain of rice away because they know how much famine there was in China. So you can imagine you have a generation where some people are enjoying the fruits, but then some people are still traumatic of what they went through, right? So Liu and Deng allowed families to farm small plots again and sell their extra produce. They told local officials to stop faking numbers and focus on survival. And these quiet reforms saved lives. So by 1962, food production began to rise again, and the famine slowly ended. But Mao did not see that as help. He saw it as betrayal. You know, he believed that the party was abandoning his revolution, that China was losing its revolutionary spirit. He thought people were becoming too comfortable, too soft. And that fear of losing control is what led him to his next dangerous move. And you know, as I was researching this, I kept asking myself, how much power can one individual have? You even have people in your own party telling you, hey Manze, you're going the wrong direction, man. You're going the wrong direction. And you also have people in your own party who can't tell you the truth because of how much they fear you. So instead of coming and telling you there's no food, they start faking and telling you how much grain there are in the stores because they cannot face you as a leader and tell you the truth. So you have one man who has costed the lives of over 45 million people, and he continues making mistakes after mistakes after mistakes because this illusion of power, the one these presidents enjoy so much, the one they think they deserve, the one where they forget to serve the people and make themselves some sort of demigods. Like he has two people who are trying to bring the country back to normal. But because of self-pride, ego, he's like, you guys, you are betraying the movement. You are too soft. China, we are supposed to be hardcore. You guys are soft. So in 1966, he launched what he called the Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution. It was supposed to purify China, to remove capitalist, traditional, and foreign influences. But in reality, this was his own attempt to regain absolute power and silence anyone who had questioned him during the famine. He called on the youths, these are students in schools and universities, to rise up against authority. He told them that the old ways were corrupt, that even teachers, parents, and party officials could be enemies of the revolution. Millions of teenagers joined what became known as the Red Guards. And these guards were given red armbands and treated like heroes. They stormed classrooms, dragged their teachers outside, shaved their heads, and forced them to wear signs calling themselves traitors. They banned libraries and temples. They banned their art, whatever music there was, whatever books, they banned all of that. People even were there destroying old photographs, even their own parents' graves, just to prove their loyalty. And it became a competition because everyone wanted to show devotion to Mao. You had families getting torn apart. Children were there reporting their own parents to the authorities. Neighbors were betraying each other. And as chaos spread, factories stopped running, schools shut down, and universities went silent. A whole generation of Chinese youth lost the chance to get an education. My dear African youths, times are coming when your politicians will use you to the core, when they will convince you that even your own parents are enemies of the revolution, when they will tell you these traditions don't matter, these teachers don't matter. Nothing here matters. We want to form something new. And it's funny because they always go for the youths. They always go for people who are enthusiastic, aggressive, and they will use you to the core. And I'm sure even among African politics, you've started seeing some juniors talking the way they want, being very aggressive. You know, yesterday here in Kenya, I heard one of them telling the people who are talking about Tanzania or encouraging Tanzania government to deal with activists, you know, especially from Kenya. And if you can't deal with them, please bring them here and they will finish them off. You see, ask yourself, where do you get the confidence to say such words? It's because you want to prove loyalty. It's because the guy who you are worshiping to look at you and say, yeah, you are my guy. You are doing whatever I'm asking you to do. Please know you are not the first one. That already happened in China, and the results were disastrous. And you will have people like Mao watching all this from the city and calling it revolutionary energy. But what was happening in China was anarchy. A country was eating itself from the inside. By the early 1970s, even the Communist Party could not function. Mao had to call in the army to stop the same revolution he had started. Millions had died or disappeared by then. The official Chinese records never give full numbers, but historians estimate at least, in this particular one, 1 to 2 million deaths happened, with tens of millions persecuted or displaced. By the time this guy is dying in 1976, China was spiritually and economically exhausted. Factories were broken, farms were weak, schools had barely functioned for 10 years, and trust between people was gone. This was a country full of trauma. A nation that had been told for decades that suffering was the price they had to pay for progress. And yet, for all that control, all that fear, all that revolutionary discipline, China was still poor. Ordinary people had nothing. Keyword, ordinary people had nothing. The same youths who had been told, betray your parents, shave your teacher's head, destroy these graves. Even them at the end of the day, they had nothing. And I see that happening even in Africa's context, where you have these politicians telling you to cause chaos for a leso and 2 packets of unga. And you go ahead and you do it. Huh? Let me tell you guys, the dream that Mao had promised China had turned into silence, fear, and graves, nothing else. And now I want us to get to the second part, because I want us to understand how China overcame all this, right? So that when you have Africa's leaders here telling you about China, tomorrow we are going to do an episode on Singapore, because nowadays we can't breathe as Kenyans without an example from Singapore. We have to talk about Singapore so that we also understand, what are we emulating? What has their history been like? Because until we understand a country's history, stop emulating everything, you know? But let's go back to China, because after Mao's death, new leaders had a choice. Sometimes you gotta say, yeah, thank God, kaput, you are going to die. Because it gives other people a choice. And these new leaders had a couple of choices here. Continue down that path of total control or take a different road. And that's where a quiet, pragmatic man named Deng Xiaoping, the one we spoke about, re-entered the story. This man would turn everything around, not through ideology, but through common sense. Deng had been a close ally of Mao once, but during the Cultural Revolution, he'd been purged and publicly humiliated. He had been accused of being too capitalist, being too soft. He was stripped of power, sent away, and then slowly brought back after Mao's death. Unlike Mao, Deng was not a man of slogans or grand speeches. He was a realistic man. He looked at China and saw a nation that had sacrificed everything and still couldn't feed its own people. So he made a decision that would change the course of history. He told the party that poverty was not socialism. He said, it doesn't matter whether a cat is black or white as long as it catches mice. Meaning, the color of the ideology doesn't matter. What matters was whether it worked. And that one sentence or belief marked the beginning of a new era. Deng did not throw away communism, no. He kept it as a political shell. But inside that shell, he quietly introduced capitalism. He started with the countryside where the famine had hit hardest. Farmers were allowed to leave the collective farms and take back their own small plots of land. They could grow their own crops again, sell whatever was left after paying a state quota, and keep the profits. It was a small reform, yes, but it changed everything. Food production skyrocketed. For the first time in decades, the countryside was alive again. And guys, we are talking about 90% of China being farmers. So you can imagine how much this choice mattered even to the people in China. And then after he's done with the farms, this guy came to the cities. He created what were called special economic zones. These were areas where foreign companies could invest freely, hire local workers, and make goods for export. How many special economic zones do you have in your own country, my Africa brothers and sisters? How many? Please, when they continue talking to you about China, let them show you these things as well. And one of the first zones was Shenzhen, a small fishing village near Hong Kong. In just a few years, Shenzhen exploded into an industrial city, full of factories, workers, and opportunity. And that success became the model for the rest of the country. By 1980s, foreign investors from all over the world, Japan, US, Europe, were pouring into China. They got cheap labor, low taxes, and political stability. And then people in China got the jobs, technology, and access to global markets. The factories ran day and night, producing everything from shoes to electronics. You guys, you know China, they produce even toothpicks. So they were producing everything. And for the first time, ordinary people started to save. Cash inflow was good. So they actually had their own savings. And they could buy whatever they like. Bikes, radios, TVs, you know. And the country began to breathe again. Deng also began sending students abroad to study science, engineering, and economics. How many has your government sent abroad? How many? And he sent them because he wanted to rebuild the country's brain power, something that had been destroyed during the Cultural Revolution. And he poured resources into infrastructure, roads, power stations, ports. This is the backbone of what China would later become. Guys, are you sensing here the difference? Here in Africa, your own presidents are talking to you about having their own people go and working in the Gulf region instead of even sponsoring these young people to go and study so that they can come back home and build the nation. Huh? Anyways, so you see the difference. He's investing and he's pouring back resources. He's already telling foreigners, come. This is a friendly place for you to work in. Because you can imagine if you have a foreign company that is going to employ 1,000 young people, that is an asset in your own country. But now here you have foreign companies telling you they cannot even operate here because, no, the conditions are too tough. Yeah? So Deng did a wonderful job. But even as China opened up economically, he made one thing very clear. The Communist Party would stay in control. By all means, please stay in control. Just stay in control, but give us what we need as citizens. And you'll hear some of your politicians here telling you, China, freedom of speech is very limited. Oh, China, you cannot be a blogger unless you have a degree. Oh, China, China. Yeah, freedom of speech in China is still limited. Opposition was still banned and the media was still censored. And the difference was that now people there maybe were too busy working and rebuilding to protest. In exchange for growth, most accepted silence. Is it a good thing? Absolutely not. But that was the unwritten deal. The party will deliver prosperity and the people will not challenge it. The party will deliver what? Prosperity. Are we together? By the time China joined the World Trade Organization in 2001, that deal had worked. The country had been growing at nearly 10% a year for decades. Over 800 million people had been lifted out of extreme poverty, according to the World Bank. Cities that once had dirt roads now had skyscrapers, airports, and bullet trains. China became the world's factory, producing phones, clothes, computers, cars, almost everything. Its foreign reserves increased, its military modernized, and its global influence exploded. But of course, the control never went away. Every newspaper, TV station, and online platform remained under the eye of the party. Every major company had party officials on its board. Every religion was regulated. It was development, but also under heavy surveillance. Freedom, of course, but with limits. And that's the version of China the world sees today. A country that rose from poverty to power, but they also did it through control, not democracy. A country that proved you can rebuild a modern economy without political freedom as long as you have order, discipline, and a population too afraid or too busy to question authority. That is why so many leaders in the global south, especially in Africa, look to China and say, maybe that's what we need. Strong leadership, strict order, less noise. But what they forget is that China did not just rise because it silenced people. It rose because it reformed its economy. It invested in education, built infrastructure, and traded smartly with the world. All while ordinary citizens worked like their lives depended on it. And for China, it worked. They turned their hunger into factories. They replaced poverty with these big industries. And they became powerful enough to stand toe-to-toe with the West. But it came at a cost. Millions died. Millions more disappeared. And even today, people still live knowing that power in China answers to no one. Now, here's the thing. This same logic, this same belief system is slowly finding a new home here in Africa. You will hear it in speeches endlessly. You will see it in how governments respond to criticism. And you feel it in the way citizens are being told to stay calm for the sake of progress. And the argument is always the same. We need order before freedom. We need discipline before democracy. And lately, no country shows that argument more clearly than Tanzania. When you look at Tanzania today, you can almost feel the same conversation happening. Only this time, it's not being called a revolution. It's called development. If you've been following what's happening since the election, you've seen there are two stories that keep colliding online, two versions. One side says the government is right. Africa can't move forward with constant noise, protests, and opposition, or even chaos. They say we need order. And then you have the other side saying, no, that is not order, that is fear. You can't silence people and call it peace. It's the same battle of ideologies that once shaped China. And now it's replaying itself in Africa right before our eyes. Those defending the government say that strong leadership sometimes means making hard and popular choices. They argue that too much freedom slows progress. They point to China and say, look, they cracked down, they focused, and now they are powerful. But then the people on the other side, the activists, people who like making the noises, journalists, exiled voices, or ordinary people are asking, at what cost? They see families losing loved ones for speaking up. They see media being silenced, internet blackouts during protests, and citizens living in fear for simply asking basic questions or even dancing to a challenge. Yeah, you'll be charged for treason. Yeah, you just by saying you'll also sell masks to people when they protest, you'll be charged for treason. And now people are saying, this whole thing you are telling us, this is not leadership. This is intimidation. You're intimidating us. The truth is, a government that fears its people cannot call itself strong. And that's what makes Tanzania's moment here so crucial. Because it's not just about one country. It's about Africa deciding what kind of progress do we want to believe in. Do we want China's version of order? Fast roads, big projects, and silent citizens? Or our own version of order where growth comes with dignity, where we have dialogue and accountability? And let's be honest, many politicians across the continent are now copying China's playbook. They love the power that comes with control. That is why they will even dare you and tell you, no one disappeared under my regime, and I'm daring you to come out and tell me who disappeared, even when the truth is right there in front of them. These politicians admire how China can censor, detain or make critics disappear and still get investments and applause from the rest of the world. So they copy the language. We need stability. We are protecting the nation. We are fighting misinformation. But if you listen closely, it's the same logic that justified the famine, the Cultural Revolution, and decades of fear in China. It's the same idea that says the people are the problem, not the system. And that's what's happening in Tanzania right now. A government saying it's defending the nation from chaos, while citizens are being told to accept pain in the name of progress. Yet the truth is very simple. No country ever becomes great by silencing its people. Development built on fear will always collapse the day people stop pretending. Because one of the things I love to say is, if you have a boil, you cannot cover it. Because covering the boil delays the healing process. And this battle of ideas is not just about Tanzania. You can feel it everywhere across Africa. It's a very quiet war no one talks about, but everyone senses. A war between two models of power. On one side is the China model, strict control, fast growth, no arguments. On the other side is the democratic model, open debate, messy politics at times, and slower progress, but democratic. And every African politician seems to be standing somewhere in between, trying to choose, which path do I follow for my people? And you see it in Rwanda, where Kagame is praised for clean streets and order, but also feared for his intolerance to the opposition. You see it in Uganda, where decades of stability have turned into lifetime rule. You see it in Ethiopia, where their dream of uniting under a strong central government exploded into a brutal civil war. And you see it even here in Kenya, where elections are loud and free, but corruption and inequality keep eating the system from within. It's the same question repeating itself. Is Africa trading freedom for progress? Because look closely and you'll see how global powers have learned to sell us the versions of success, their own version of success. China comes offering roads, railways, and ports, but they won't talk about human rights. All they care about is deals and deadlines. And then you have Western nations like the US. They will come offering democracy. But they also come with debts, conditions, and control. Both sides are still buying influence. They still influence in Africans, but they are using two different methods. One will use money, the other one will use morality. And guys, caught in between are African citizens, people who just want to live better, feed their families, speak freely, and be heard. They don't care whether the model is Chinese or American. They just want systems that work. But the tragedy is, the more our politicians play these global games, the more disconnected they become from the people who put them in power. And I saw this on X. What if Kenyans don't want a Singapore? What if Kenyans just want Kenya? By the way, what if Ugandans just want Uganda? What if Tanzanians just want Tanzania? What if we don't want China? And that is why what is happening in Tanzania matters. Because if this idea that control is the same thing as stability wins there, it will spread across the whole continent. And it will give every politician an excuse to silence dissent and call it discipline. It will turn the word patriotism into a weapon. And it will teach a new generation of Africans to mistake fear for peace. And we've been here before. You know, during colonialism, they forced silence on us and called it civilization. And now, decades later, it's been sold again. This time they are calling it development. You shh, as long as your country is developing, shh, 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 shh. Huh? And you see, no matter what they call it, the outcome is still the same. You have power at the top, obedience at the bottom. The Africans, please, we don't have to pick between this chaos and control. We can choose a third path, our own path, one that is built on truth, not fear, one that is built on accountability, not intimidation. Because real progress will not come from silencing people. It will come from listening to the people. And I see Kagame has started doing it. He has forums now where the people can tell him this and that. You know, he's opened it up. I don't know if this is the small window that Mao also used, where he told people speak and then he did the necessary. But at least conversations are happening. Should we lose 45 million Africans so that we can develop like China did? Is this why when you have 2 or 3 people die, no one cares? Because, guys, stop protesting. These chaos are slowing us down. You'll hear the business community saying, why do you guys need to protest? We are losing billions and billions every time you guys protest. Okay, should we follow now that path? Or should Africans continue fighting for dignity, even if it slows progress? Because at the end of the day, you know, Chinese people are not suffering because of bad roads. And you want to emulate that, but still give us mediocre services here. You still want us to be silent the way China is, the way people there are silent. No hospitals, bad roads. You keep taxing people. Every time you wake up, you're just thinking about people's pay slip and what now to cut from their pay slips. Maybe you'll even now have a milk levy where you tell people, I don't know, guys, what is the point of a modern city if people can't speak freely in it? And what's the use of freedom if your children will still sleep hungry? And this is the moral and economic tug of war defining our continent today. And maybe as I wind up, I would love to know, which side are you on, right? Are you on the moral camp where you say people first? You know, you believe no amount of development is worth innocent lives. And you say, you know, you can't shoot your way to peace. Are you one of the people who argue that when politicians use fear to maintain control, that's not stability? That is them silencing the people? Are you one of the people who say, you know what, a country is nothing without its people, and no road, no bridge, no skyscrapers or foreign investment can justify killing your own citizens for that sort of development? Or are you on the other camp, you know, the pragmatic camp, where you're saying progress first? You argue that the world doesn't respect chaos, that sometimes to build a strong nation, politicians must make tough decisions, even if it means silencing their own people. Are you one of the people who is advocating, you know, the use of China as a big example where millions will suffer, yes, for now, but then later on, your country will become powerful, rich, and feared globally? Please tell me, which side are you on? Do you believe Africa, we need, you know, I saw somewhere people saying Africans need a dictator. These people need a strong person to control them. You know, which side are you on? I don't know. And I would love to hear from you. I would love to hear from you. If you are one of the people who are saying we can't eat democracy, why are you guys protesting? Democracy for what? We can't eat democracy. Please let me remind you, people in China might not even have a reason to protest right now because their children are in good schools. They are not dying of hunger. They are driving good cars. By the way, their health care is sorted, so they might not have a reason to protest. But here, even if you say, shh, let's wait for progress, and 2 billion shillings disappears every other day, you know, every other day we are losing 2 billion shillings to corruption. You don't even have the roads yet. You don't even have a functional healthcare system. Like, what do you have? Why are you telling people to be silent? What exactly do you have? And I know it's a tough conversation. We can look at China and say, okay, over 45 million people there died, but look at them now. Progress is progress. It's beautiful. They're enjoying life. You can look at it and leave it at that. But then now when you try to emulate that here in Africa, where you have so many youths dying, so many people losing their lives, and at the end of the day, there's no progress. I don't know, guys. I don't know. If you are going to borrow a blueprint, or if you are going to borrow something from another country, at least tell your citizens the truth as well, so they have a choice. Please warn them in advance and tell them, I think 100,000 of you are gonna die, but I'm gonna get you somewhere. I'm gonna get you to a place that you will enjoy the fruits. Please. And also look at people like Mao. Them, they will watch people die and they don't care because they are so power hungry. They want to be the only people making decisions. They want to be the only people who we get to listen to. And I have to remind you, my dear African brothers and sisters, please always remember you put these people there. You see, unlike China, where you can't question the party, I love that here in our own African countries, we enjoy a bit of democracy, where you get to decide, this is the person we want. And remember, you put these people there. The point where they start behaving as if they put themselves there is what bothers me. That really bothers me. I don't know at what point they think they got themselves there. You, the people, have the power. You, the people, are the ones who go and cast these votes. You, the people, are the ones who get to decide. We do not want to be led by you. You know? Let them stop blackmailing you with developments that you can't see. If someone says, I'm going to create 1 million jobs in my first 3 years, hold them accountable. Ziko wapi? Where are they? All right? But let me know which version works for you. Do we go the China version, where, of course, history there says they lost this much lives, but now they are progressing? Or do we continue fighting for democracy, even though progress is very slow. Leave your thoughts on the comment section. I just felt like we needed that conversation today. I don't know why, but I just felt like we needed to have it today. So that when people keep telling you about China, please let them tell you the truth about that place as well. And then you can now make an informed decision. But there are so many things I left out. I would encourage you to go and study the history of China. I saw someone had recommended us to bring a whole conversation on how China bounced back economically. So I think that's something we can look deeper in. But in the meantime, please, all I care about today is which version do you want us to follow, guys? Which one do you think will work for Africa? Right? So share your thoughts on the comment section. Just want to say thank you for 1.44 million subscribers. Woke up in the weekend and we were at 1.44 million subscribers. Thank you so much for making it happen. Our goal is to get to 1.5 million subscribers by the time the year ends. So if you've watched this until the end and you've not subscribed, please consider subscribing. It goes a long way. And thank you so much for also contributing towards independent journalism. Our M-Pesa number is right there. Our paybill number is right there. Our PayPal details are right there. So if you want to contribute, please feel free to use any of those, and also share this with people and let's have a conversation at the comment section. I look forward to just chatting with you guys there. So don't be shy. Keep it respectful also on the comment section. Let's continue our conversation right there. My name is Lynn Ngugi. Thank you to my amazing team who always gets to put this work together. I really do appreciate you guys. And if there is also anything you also who is watching cannot share on the comment section, consider sharing your email with us at info@lnn.digital. See you later in the day, hopefully. Bye-bye.